Well, thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Well, thank you very much. Good to see you on and see some familiar faces, which is always gratifying. Now, I just want to start with a little bit of sympathy for the people in Kenosha, Wisconsin. I bet you they never thought in 1,000 years they would be in a central phase of a communist revolution. You know, you move to Kenosha, that's Kenosha, a town of 100,000 people in the middle of Wisconsin. And did they think they were going to get worldwide publicity and have a Maoist insurrection on their hands, having their houses, their businesses burnt, their cars burnt, their police attacked, 2 people killed on their streets? And nobody's calling it for what it is. This is a Maoist communist insurrection. The group behind this attack is called Freedom Road Socialist Organization. Freedom Road Socialist Organization, FRSO. Now, Freedom Road Socialist Organization is a pro-Chinese Maoist communist group. They follow the Chinese line. They support China. They support North Korea. They support Venezuela. They've sent 5 delegations to Venezuela in the last year, and they hate America. Now, you'll be shocked to learn that it was Freedom Road Socialist Organization that also started the riots in Minneapolis a few weeks ago after the killing of George Floyd. Well, now it's a gentleman, Mr. Blake, who's been shot, but it's exactly the same communists. The same front organizations, the same red t-shirts with FRSO written right on the front of them, and still our media hasn't picked up on this. Now, Freedom Road Socialist Organization came out of the Maoist movements of the 60s and 70s, out of Students for a Democratic Society, the Weathermen, the Revolutionary Communist Party, etc. And they and now they have a youth wing, and they also call that Students for a Democratic Society. They also have another front group which they started in November 2019 called the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. And if you go to the FRSO Facebook page right now and scroll down, you will see video footage of the protests, and right smack in front of hundreds of people are 3 banners: FRSO, National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, and SDS. They are 100% leading this, and the man standing in front of them, egging them on and stirring them up, is a man called Kobe Guillory from Chicago, who is a member of both Freedom Road Socialist Organization and the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. Now, in Minnesota, the group that sparked the riots was a group called the Twin Cities Coalition for Justice for Jamal. It was commemorating a young black guy who was killed by the police in 2015, Jamal Clark, I believe his name was. And that was headed by a woman called Jess Sundin, a leading member of the Freedom Road Socialist Organization. And they claim open credit for sparking the riots in Minneapolis that burnt downtown Minneapolis. The same group did riots in Utah, it did riots in Dallas, Houston, Tucson, Arizona, Los Angeles, Tallahassee, Tampa, Jacksonville, and Miami, as well as several other centers. This is a Maoist, pro-Chinese communist operation. The day that President Trump was inaugurated, January the 20th, 2017, the leader of Freedom Road, a woman called Steph Yorick, declared that it is our job to bring down Trump by making this country ungovernable. This was always going to happen this year, folks. The National Alliance for Racist and Political Repression was established in November 2019 with the express purpose of tackling issues of police brutality and racism, set up branches all over the country. And it was modeled after an organization of the same name set up in 1972, I believe, to get Angela Davis out of jail for the murder charges she was facing. Angela Davis, the Communist Party revolutionary, the murder charges she was facing over the killing of a judge in California. And Angela Davis came to the founding of this organization and blessed it. And the man who heads it is a man called Frank Chapman of Chicago, a Central Committee member of the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, a former Communist Party member, a member of the first NAAPR, and a convicted murderer, once sentenced to 50 years plus life from robbery, killing gone wrong. That was the Communist Party who got him out of jail. So these are the people burning American cities right now. So why are they doing it now? Well, it's election year. And you've got to go back a little bit. Now, in 2019, in May 2019, President Trump put tariffs on Chinese goods. Now, the response, according to Xinhua news agency, Xinhua news agency of the official news agency of the Chinese Communist Party, said China's response would be people's war against the United States. Now, people thought that meant, they're going to put some tariffs on American goods. No, people's war means war. It is every form of warfare short of direct political confrontation. It is supplying drugs to the enemy, like fentanyl, for instance. It is cyber warfare. It is espionage. It is subversion. It is causing riots in your enemy's territory. It is obviously biological warfare. Only when the enemy is destroyed does your army march. This is Sun Tzu. This is Mao. Mao defeated the nationalist Chinese army with a ragtag bunch of revolutionaries with hardly any weapons, never ever confronted them in open battle. He used to flood their territory with counterfeit money to crash the nationalist economy. He'd supply drugs to the troops, ambush troops, but never direct military confrontation, never a direct battle. Well, this is what's happening now. China is waging people's war on the United States. And we have still not woken up to that fact. Chinese communists are burning our cities, and we still have not made the connection. Now, after People's War was declared, not much happened till January, when we started to hear about a new COVID virus coming out of China. Well, this COVID virus probably came from one of the biological weapons factories in Wuhan. We don't know it was deliberately released, but we do know it was almost certainly genetically engineered. But I believe the timing was super suspicious, because it was just after President Trump had caned China on trade. It was after the anti-communists had won the Taiwanese presidency, backed by Trump. And it was after the Hong Kong protests, also backed by Trump. The communist leaders of China were losing face. And if you lose face in China, you lose power not long afterwards. So the Chinese leadership understood if they didn't destroy Trump, Trump would destroy them. They'd have a revolution on their own territory. So we do know the Chinese deliberately weaponized the virus and spread it to this country. Every year, there is a massive Chinese New Year celebration in Wuhan. It goes for a week. It's like Mardi Gras. And Chinese come from all over the world to celebrate. Well, this year, the local authorities asked the Chinese Communist Party, should we cancel this year's celebrations to stop the spread of the COVID. And the Chinese Communist Party said, no, it goes ahead. So Chinese came from New York and San Francisco and Stockholm and Paris and London and Sydney and Auckland, New Zealand, to the celebrations, partied for a week, and went back to their home countries and spread the disease all over the world. Now, a little bit after that, on April 2nd, the Chinese Communist Party International Department released a letter signed by 230 world communist parties, including Communist Party USA. And the gist of the letter was this. There was 4 talking points. And this is how the Chinese communists promulgate their line. This is the line you must pursue. This is what you communists must be saying. So the message was, there was 4 messages. First one, if you call this a Chinese virus, if you blame China for the virus, you're a racist. Second message, China has leading the world in tackling this horrible virus. We should all be grateful to China. Third message, China has a wonderful socialized healthcare system. That's how we can deal with it. Look at the mess they're making in America because they don't have socialized healthcare. Fourth message, blame Trump, and blame Trump some more. Has anybody heard any of these messages at all? Because they all come directly from communist China. Now, Tucker Carlson had a man on his show recently, Brian D. Wright, a former CIA officer and a Democrat. And he very embarrassedly said, he said, my party is following the Chinese line over COVID. They're doing shutdowns. They're following the Chinese line. So why did we have to shut down? Because every previous epidemic, typhoid, yellow fever, polio, whatever, the standard procedure was you quarantine the sick and everybody else takes precautions and goes about their business. But the World Health Organization told us, no, we couldn't do that this time because there is evidence of asymptomatic transmission. People without symptoms are spreading the disease. So the quarantine approach won't work. So we have to understand that the World Health Organization, which thankfully America is now out of, is headed by Mr. Tedros from Ethiopia, an openly Marxist, Leninist, Maoist who loves China like a chocolate. He is China's man, 100% lock, stock, and barrel. So he was promoting the Chinese line. So why are the Democrats buying into this? Well, the Democrats and the Chinese have a common enemy. That's Mr. Trump. And the Democrats and the Chinese understand that if the US economy crashes, that reduces Trump's chances of re-election. Trump was looking good at the beginning of the year. The economy was humming, everybody was happy, and a re-election was pretty darn much a shoo-in. Well, it ain't such a shoo-in now because the economy has been taken off the table to some degree. And the Democrats will keep this going till the election day if they can. They know they would rather win with 40 million unemployed than lose with full employment and a prosperous economy and everybody happy. That's just who they are. So, but there is an even more sinister aspect to this, which nobody's talking about, which I believe is the real reason. President Obama gutted the US military. He made did more damage to the military than most armies could ever imagine. Cancelled weapon systems, brought in transgender policies, horrible rules of engagement for your troops. He lowered morale, lowered the budget. Everything was a mess. Meanwhile, Russia and China are rearming like crazy. And we need to understand that Russia and China are allies. They're both allied in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, a political, military, and economic alliance. Look it up online, Google it. And anyway, so they have been rearming. So Trump comes into power understanding that we're going to have war very soon, and one that America will lose unless he gets the military back on track. which he started to do. Changed the rules of engagement, got rid of the transgender policy, increased the military budget, morale went up, everybody in the military was much happier and much more prepared and much more able to deter the Russians and the Chinese. But you can only do that off the back of a strong economy. What happens when your economy is in the toilet? Well, already 31 Democrats, led by the pro-Chinese communist Barbara Lee from California and the pro-terrorist Marxist Mark Lee from Wisconsin, right near Kenosha, have written a letter to the Armed Services Committee demanding big budget cuts in the next defense big defense cuts in the next budget go around. And you can guarantee if they're elected, you will see the military absolutely slashed to the bone. Then they will implement the Green New Deal, which will destroy the US economy and virtually eliminate the military. Who do you think is driving these programs, folks? Who do you think has an interest in destroying your military? The Chinese and the Russians. The people that Freedom Road and other groups look to for guidance. The people the Democrats now look to for guidance. This is a military operation to destroy your president and your military budget so Russia and China can rule this planet. Very simple, straight up, black and white, that's what it is. So we're just starting to raise our heads above the parapets and get back to work and go back to restaurants and spending money and having a good time when we get 5 weeks of riots. Well, we know that Freedom Road Socialist Organization organized a big part of them, but not all of them. The other part was mainly organized, and it wasn't Antifa. Antifa is a minuscule part of this. It wasn't Antifa. The main organizers of the rest of it were a group called Liberation Road, also a pro-Chinese communist party. Liberation Road used to be part of Freedom Road, and then they split in 1999 and became two parties, both called Freedom Road Socialist Organization, which was very, very confusing. One group wanted to work with the Democrats, one didn't. And it was the one in Minneapolis that started the riots who didn't. But the other group, Liberation Road, started a front in 2013. You've probably heard of it. It's got a bit of publicity lately. Their front group is called Black Lives Matter. That was started by three young women, Patrice Kahlurs, Alicia Garza, and Opal Tometi. And they were just three black chicks, sitting around talking, really disgusted that Trayvon Martin had been hunted down and killed in Florida. And it's clear that cops were just going out hunting young black men for sport, and they had to do something. So they thought up this hashtag, Black Lives Matter. And wow, it just took off. And they were so amazed about this. And now it's become a movement, and it's just completely spontaneous, all complete garbage. These three women are hardcore Maoist communist revolutionaries, all of them. This was a complete operation from start to finish. It still is a complete Maoist Chinese operation. But you've got Republicans taking a knee to Black Lives Matter. You've got massive corporations giving them millions of dollars, all a pro-Chinese communist group intent on revolution in this country. Also connected to Palestinian radicals, also connected to Filipino radical communists, also connected to Hamas, Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, and to Iran. Just all our favorite people. And so Black Lives Matter is basically ran the rest of the riots through their movement called their organization Movement for Black Lives, which is a coordinating group for all the Black Lives Matter groups. They had a trial run in Ferguson, Missouri in 2014, totally run by Liberation Road and headed by Jamala Rogers of the Liberation Road. And they brought 10,000 people in from out of state to burn down Ferguson, Missouri. And they particularly targeted black-owned businesses, because you can't have prosperous black people, can you? Because that would not suit the narrative that blacks are an oppressed nation in this country. So these are the groups that did it. These are the groups that are running the riots. They're both pro-Chinese. Communist Party USA is involved too, which is also pro-Chinese. Party of Socialism and Liberation is also involved, which is also pro-Chinese. And the Workers' World Party is also involved. And guess who they support? So this is a Chinese operation to basically wage people's war on the United States. And you've got the Venezuelans helping, you've got the Iranians helping, probably got the Russians helping as well, and you've certainly got the Chinese government helping. They've been pumping all sorts of race propaganda into America, and that's why Trump closed down the Chinese consulate in Houston, because they had people in there helping the rioters. And nobody is saying who's doing it. They're acting like this is some homegrown operation that's got nothing to do with China, when it's absolutely a Chinese project. They wrecked our economy with the disease. Now they're trying to drive us into civil war with the riots. And we're on the verge of that. We're not far away from having that break out. And they'd like to do it before the election, because I think they've got an idea that President Trump might actually win this one. But back to the election, Kamala Harris is a Maoist. She comes out of the same Maoist grouping that gave us Black Lives Matter, and Andrew Gillum, who almost won the governorship of Florida, who was backed by Liberation Road, and also Stacey Abrams, who was touted as a VP candidate for Biden, almost won the governorship of Georgia, also backed by Liberation Road. So this is another little aspect that's going on here. The Chinese are trying to bring this country down in every way they can, and they're also working electorally. And you think, if you're a leader of China and you wanted to destroy President Trump, your greatest ever enemy, would you want to risk a multi-billion-dollar trade war when you didn't have to? Would you want to risk a $1 trillion shooting war when you weren't quite ready, when America wasn't quite weak enough? Or would you spend a few $1 million backing American communists to riot in the streets and flip districts? Now, a lot of you may remember that Virginia was once a reliably red state. It was a very Republican state. Always went Republican for many, many years. Well, in 2008, it went for Obama. Now it's totally blue. All three main executive officers, governor, attorney general, etc., all Democrats. The Democrats control both houses of the legislature, both senators, and most of the congressmen members. It's a blue state. How did this happen? Well, in Virginia, they have a group called New Virginia Majority. It's like Acorn. They all wear orange shirts, and they go out every day signing up minority voters to register them and to get them to the polls. That's what they do. And when Virginia finally went completely blue last year, the co-leader of New Virginia Majority wrote an editorial in the New York Times taking credit for flipping Virginia. They said, "We did it, New Virginia Majority." Well, they didn't mention that New Virginia Majority is headed by a man called John Liss, a bona fide member of Liberation Road. Most of his leading staff members are also Liberation Road communists. The communists flipped Virginia on behalf of the Chinese. And they do it with very sophisticated maps. Well, they did it with two ways. First, they worked with Terry McAuliffe, the governor of Virginia, to give voting rights to 200,000 Virginia felons. They even gave McAuliffe an award, a certificate at their annual dinner for his work. And the current governor of Virginia, Mr. Northam, made Tram Nguyen, the co-leader of New Virginia Majority, put her on his transition team this year for all the work they've done to help Democrats get elected. Now, they've signed up about 300,000 minority voters in Virginia, and that's what's made the difference. It's made all the difference. And how they did this was very sophisticated. They used what they call GMS mapping technology, and that's very sophisticated mapping, computer generated. You put all the information you can in, and it gives you maps telling you the racial breakdown of every precinct, income, voting patterns, the whole lot. So they can send their canvases, like to a Cambodian area, they'll send Cambodian canvases. To a black area, a Haitian area, they'll send Haitian canvases. You know, they target beautifully to get the maximum bang for their buck. Now, those maps are generated on contract by a guy called Steve McClure, a Liberation Road cadre, who got a geography degree from George Washington University about 2010. Well, since that time, he's been working generating maps to flip Virginia, and you'll never guess where he works out of. It is out of the geography department of Wuhan University, China. He is using Chinese computers and Chinese technology, getting paid a Chinese salary, no doubt, to flip districts in Virginia. If that ain't illegal, I'd be very, very surprised. But you don't think the Virginia Attorney General is going to investigate that, because he was elected by New Virginia majority. They have the same operation going in Georgia, the same operation going in North Carolina. They've actually taken over the Durham, North Carolina City Council, and are using the huge black population of that state to flip the state. And they're almost there. That's why North Carolina has a Democrat governor. They did the same with Kentuckians for the Commonwealth in Kentucky, which is why Kentucky now has a Democrat governor. And guess what, Floridians? They have a group called New Florida Majority, which is out there signing up hundreds of thousands of minority voters in this state. They are the people that got 40% extra Democrat vote for Andrew Gillum, almost got him elected. They also backed Stacey Abrams in Georgia. They only need to flip North Carolina or Florida or both in this next election cycle, and Trump loses. And that is what they're trying to do. And New Florida Majority was also the group behind the referendum in Florida in 2018 that gave 1.4 million felons the right to vote in Florida. And guess who's out there signing them all up to vote Democrat right now? So people need to understand that China is waging war on America electorally, biologically, and kinetically, with riots and burning your cities. And you're still buying cheap Chinese toasters at Walmart. Isn't it about time we totally socially distanced China and stopped buying their goods, boycotted their companies, making sure your investments in your 401ks aren't invested in Chinese companies, which many of them are? They were trying to put, Trump stopped this, they were trying to put US military pensions into Chinese companies, to invest it in Chinese companies connected to the Chinese Communist Party and the People's Liberation Army. So your soldiers were about to pay for the army that was going to kill their sons and daughters when it came time. This is how blatant this has got. And this is how badly this country is subverted by members of your Congress and Senate who are on the take for the Chinese, the Iranians, the Cubans, the Venezuelans, and probably even the North Koreans, and probably the Russians. This is where we're at. So if you're still listening, people, and I wouldn't be surprised if you weren't, you're probably thinking, what's Loudon even doing in the country? This is hopeless. What are we going to do? Well, I'm here, rather than in my beautiful New Zealand, building bunkers and stocking up on baked beans, because I have tremendous hope for this country. You know, the 2016 election convinced me that God is not finished with this country yet, folks. Hillary Clinton should have won. We all know that. But she didn't. But it's a bit like the Old Testament, you know. The Israelites, there were many times when the Israelites got a second chance. You know, you're going off the farm, guys. You're not doing the right thing. And God gives them another chance. But how many times did they ever get a third chance? If they ignored that second chance, did they ever get a third? Well, we're on our second chance, people. Against all the odds, we were given Donald Trump, the first president in a long time who's actually put America first, the first president to stand up to China, the man who's had more Chinese spies arrested than any other, who's been harder on the Chinese by a country mile than any other, and who stood for American industry and tried to rebuild the Midwest and American manufacturing. This is all what China hates. And President Trump said recently, if Joe Biden is elected, he will sell the country to China. And he couldn't have picked a better VP to do it than the pro-China Maoist communist Kamala Harris. Couldn't have picked a better one. This is China's dream team. So we're going to make sure they're not elected, folks. But we're going to make sure they're not elected by a big margin, because what's going to happen if it's a tight margin, you're going to have 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 states that, because of postal voting, are not going to be able to declare on election night. And they're going to drag it out for weeks and months, maybe to the point that President Trump has to leave office on January the 20th or whatever it is in 2019. And if the Democrats still hold the House, Nancy Pelosi becomes president. If you can think of a scenario for potential civil war, you tell me a better one than that. An undecided election that drags on for months. Nancy Pelosi might become president. President Trump has to leave office. Can you imagine the chaos that could ensue out of that? So we got to win by enough of a margin that that doesn't even figure into the equation, because that's their plan. And I'll tell you another plan they have, which you may say this is absolutely crazy, but most of what I've said tonight you would have told me was crazy 5 years ago. We're living in crazy times, folks. There's actually an active plan. This is actually under consideration, I'm told, by the Democrats, that if Trump wins, Oregon, Washington State, and California secede from the Union. Just watch that. Don't believe me. I don't expect you to believe that. But just bear that in mind, because that is seriously, I believe, under consideration by the Democrats. And if you think that we've got chaos now, you wait to see what happens if that comes down. So, you know, I'm giving you bleak news, folks, but this is the reality, and we can only win if we confront actually what's there. Because we need to understand, when President Trump's re-elected, we have to come down on the deep state, and we have to come down on the Muslim Brotherhood, and we have to come down on the communists in this country. They are committing felonies right, left, and center. President Trump has had 4,000 of them arrested so far, but which is great. But I haven't seen any of the leaders taken down, because I don't believe the FBI knows who the leaders are, because they've been too busy in the last 8 years checking you guys out, I mean the Tea Party, to worry about actual bona fide communists and terrorists, because they all knew, according to Obama, that the real danger to this country were veterans and the Tea Party, not Maoist communists, not Muslim Brotherhood supporters, not pro-Venezuelan or pro-Chinese activists, the Tea Party. And we've all seen how that's been going. So and we've got to understand, the FBI is still part of the deep state, you know, at leadership. The Justice Department is still controlled by the deep state to a large degree. So they're not going to help. So President Trump is a little bit hamstrung. But so you know, President Trump wins, and I believe the tide is turning, and I believe he can win. But we cannot be complacent about this. We've got to do everything we can to get him across the finish line. This is do or die, folks. Absolutely do or die. So he wins. The border wall gets built. They crack down on the left, which leads the Democrats. The public, the communist nature of the Democrats is exposed for all to see. There's massive investment into the US economy because when Trump got elected the first time, the checkbooks came out. You know, nobody was going to invest, no businessman was going to invest big time under a Hillary Clinton economy. But when Trump got elected, the factories were built, the projects were started, and employment went through the roof. Now the COVID has knocked that back. But I'll tell you what, Trump wins again and stabilizes the country, you'll see the checkbooks open like you've never seen. You'll see massive foreign and domestic investment in this country. You will see black employment go through the roof. You'll see wages go through the roof because there won't be an endless supply of cheap foreign labor, illegal labor, to depress wages. You'll see a situation in America that will make it almost impossible for the Democrats to win anything for the next 20 years. You'll see a major shift in the black population towards the conservative movement. You'll see a major shift in the Latino population, the Jewish population. Not all of them by any means, but you'll see enough to make the Democrats a minority party for a very long time. Then we can start to do things like abolish the Department of Education so you can educate people in your own values, not Washington socialist values. Maybe we can start a movement to get America out of the United Nations, to crack down on the Muslim Brotherhood, to do all the things that we have been trying to do for some of you for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Finally, we'll be in a position to get them done. And why I think this will happen is this, because sometimes when you're on the verge of losing something, that's when you learn to appreciate it. And there's millions of Americans out there who understand right now we're on the verge of losing this country. And when they get it back, they not going to see this happen again. But look, another thing, look at the courts. President Trump's done more to put conservative judges in the courts than any other president by a country mile. Even the left-wing Ninth Circuit is now almost majority conservative. But the Supreme Court, super important. For 60 years, the left have been out there stacking the Supreme Court with basically commies who then make horrible decisions. They call that precedent and keep trashing your Constitution year after year to the point that probably 60% of what your federal government does is now unconstitutional. Well, thanks to President Trump and the volunteers right in front of me today who put him into the White House, and I was not a Trump supporter. I don't take credit for it at all. I was a very late convert. But anyway, he's there. You got him in. And, thanks to him, now you have a 5-4 technical majority on the Supreme Court. And you don't need to tell me that Roberts is a flake. Yes, I know. He's made several bad, horrible decisions, but he has voted with us more than he's voted with them. And some good decisions have come through. And this is already starting to change the tenor of the country, already starting to change the tenor of the courts. This will have huge impact in years to come. But the really important thing is this. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is getting pretty old, people. She has liver cancer. At her age, that's not a good prognosis. It's very unlikely that she will still be in the court in 4 years' time, even a year's time. So President Trump is almost certainly going to have the opportunity to appoint at least one more Supreme Court justice, maybe even two. So, I don't wish Ruth Bader Ginsburg ill. She has publicly said she would love to leave the court and go and retire and spend her last days living in New Zealand. Okay? Well, people, I'm willing to take one for the team. Okay? I'll suck it up. She can come to New Zealand, she can play bingo all day long, and you will have a 6-3 majority on the Supreme Court. Imagine what that will do for your religious liberties, your gun rights, your education, your business regulation. All of things that have been driving you down for 60 years will be revisited and overturned. Do people think I'm getting a little bit carried away here? Do people think I may be a little bit, Loudon's gone a bit loopy? People, God gave us the 2016 election for a reason. He was testing us to see if we would seize the opportunity. Well, if we seize it and we win, we will be blessed. We'll be blessed in ways that I don't think we can begin to contemplate. You know, you imagine the economic boom we can start in this country. But most of all, can you imagine the liberty boom? Don't you think the French want to be free, and the Germans and the South Africans and the Australians and the Canadians and the Taiwanese and the Chinese and the Iranians? Well, if President Trump is re-elected, folks, he will put all of the dictators on the back foot. He already has plans to deal with the Chinese. And every dictator will be on the back foot, and the good people, the freedom-loving people around the world will look to America to lead, and they will follow our example. You will see a world that is actually run where the Italians run Italy, where the French run France, where the Jordanians run Jordan, where the South Africans run South Africa, where the New Zealanders run New Zealand. What a novel concept. But this is the kind of world we can potentially see if we turn the corner now. Because I believe we're coming to a climax. We're coming to a situation where this world is either going to descend into chaos and anarchy like we have never seen, or it is going to turn a corner to a new flowering of liberty and prosperity like we've never seen. A spiritual awakening like we have never seen. This is where I believe we're at. And this all comes down to you people making the right decisions over the next few days. If you're not involved in phone banking, if you're not involved in door knocking, how much do you love your kids, people? How much do you love your grandchildren? Because if you're not actively involved in making sure we win this election, how much do you care? We've been given this God-given opportunity. It's right in front of us. We don't have to pick up guns and fight the British like you did back in your ancestors did back in the 1770s. You have to just get involved, go to the local Republican headquarters, the local Trump Club headquarters, or whatever, saying, I'm volunteering. I want a phone bank every night up until the election. I want to hold signs out on weekends. I want to do everything I can because I understand my children's future, my grandchildren's future will be determined by what I do now over the next 60 days. That's going to determine it. And I'll tell you what, people, every check you write to President Trump between now and then, or the local conservative candidate, every door you knock on, every sacrifice you make, every fishing trip you forego, every restaurant meal you forego, everything you forego between now and the election, when President Trump wins on November 3rd, are you going to tell me you'll regret it? You're going to tell me you'll regret the sacrifice you make to see that result? But I'll tell you straight, if he loses, you will regret for the rest of your life not helping him win. I can absolutely tell you that. And people, win or lose, if we lose and you try hard, you will at least earn the right to look your children in the eye and say, I did everything I possibly could for you. But if you win, and you absolutely can win this, folks, as I said before, that 2016 election convinced me that God is not finished with this country yet. If you win, You'll spark a liberty boom in this country like you've never seen before, an economic boom like you've never seen. You will have potentially a spiritual revival in this country, and you will earn the right to give your children not just the amazing country that you inherited, but one even greater. Is all of that worth a little bit of sacrifice? So I want to say to you folks, thank you so much for listening. I'm all up for questions. If you're still there, if you're still listening, I'm quite happy to take questions. But thank you to Mark and his group, and thank you all for listening tonight. Thanks to Mark for organising this. I just see people, I get a little bit impassioned because I'm here in Florida, right here, because this is the most critical part of the country and the most critical state. And I want to see a victory on November 3rd, people. Any questions?
Can you give us an update on Stephen Phillips, who wrote Brown is the New White, and his campaign to get 40 million registered to vote Democrat? I think his organization was Democracy Alliance. Is it?
Yeah, or Democracy Alliance and Democracy in Color. Steve Phillips is a lawyer, a black guy out of San Francisco, and he was a member of the League of Revolutionary Students. Yeah, well, Steve Phillips, he was a Maoist communist at Stanford University. He married a woman called Susan Sandler, who was the heiress to a $2.2 billion fortune from the Golden West Savings and Loan Company. Now, he invested that, they put a lot of that money into the progressive movement. He became part of the Democracy Alliance, which is George Soros and Norman Lear and Tom Steyer and all these left-wing billionaires. And they are basically the people who got $10 million together to get Obama ahead of Hillary Clinton by doing massive voter registration drives in southern states amongst black and Latino communities. They also backed Andrew Gillum. They also backed Stacey Abrams. They also backed Cory Booker, and Kamala Harris. So Kamala Harris is their creation, and so she is the Maoist president, the Rainbow Coalition minority president that they need to generate minority votes in southern states. That is their philosophy. Steve Phillips argues that the left already has a majority in this country because about 26% of the electorate are white progressives. They will vote Democrat no matter what. About 25%, another 27% are progressives of color. So if you add those two groups together, it's about 53, 54%. But they don't always vote frequently. So all the money on the left is now going into the southern states to energize black and Latino voters in the South. That's how they flipped Virginia. That's how they've almost got North Carolina, almost got Kentucky, almost got Georgia, and almost got Florida. So we cannot take the election for granted. The fix is in the minority. Kamala was put in specifically to get the minorities voting Democrat, and we have to make sure that's exposed and counted. Otherwise, we will lose.
So two critical states, Georgia and Florida.
Yeah, Florida and North Carolina.
What are your thoughts on the Chinese owning the United Nations and whether Trump will get us out of the United Nations?
Well, yeah, the United Nations is a communist organization controlled basically by Russia and China. So I think we should mount a campaign when Trump gets re-elected to remove us completely out of the United Nations. I don't see anybody worried about getting us out of the World Health Organization or the United Nations Human Rights Commission. That hasn't hurt America. The world hasn't ended. So yeah, absolutely. Both of those organizations are The UN is a communist organization. That's all it is. Even back in the 1980s, I had a friend who'd been a New Zealand communist and trained in Moscow. And in Moscow in those days, they used to openly say, the United Nations is our thing. We own it. It belongs to us. Yet America pays the majority of the bills. So how, it's just crazy. So absolutely we should take it very seriously to get America out of the UN, because that will stop Agenda 21. It'll stop a whole bunch of other things that are dragging us down. The country will be much, much better off without the UN.
Okay. Do you ever get lawsuit threats of slander for naming all these people as communists and Marxists? No one seems to deny it.
Nope. Never been taken up by one of them. Not one of them. And because all they know is they're just going to get, it's true. So why would they attack me and get more publicity? Yep. I do thousands of hours of research. I go through libraries. I interview people. I've said some pretty outlandish things tonight. I've named several people as committing crimes, effectively, but I stand by it. I've written these things publicly in articles many occasions. Nobody's denied what I've said. Nobody has sued me. They all just try and ignore me. That's all they can do.
Yep. Okay, let's see. Should socialist, communist, Islamists, or in our case, jihadists, who don't believe in the Constitution be allowed to run for public office?
No, they shouldn't. And I'll tell you what, see, when I came to this country, I had to swear a declaration that I'd never been involved in any Nazi or communist group that sought to overthrow the US Constitution. And but I would argue that if you believe in Sharia law, you are seeking to overthrow the US Constitution. So if if you're a Muslim, you should be asked to sign a declaration that you do not support Sharia law or any other thing that seeks to overthrow the Constitution. If you're a communist, you should also be asked to sign that too. And if you do sign it, and then you act against the interests of the Constitution, you've committed perjury, and you should be prosecuted as such. I don't believe any Sharia-compliant Muslim should even be allowed in the country. If you can't come here if you're a communist or a Nazi, why should you be allowed to come here if you're a Sharia-compliant Muslim? Right,
agreed. What are your thoughts on the Lincoln Project and the Republicans against Trump? Are they also Marxists, communists? I know Jeff Flake is one, and George Conway.
Well, look, Jeff Flake has been to Cuba several times. He has worked with the left-wing Democrats to the advantage of Cuba. He is a complete disaster. Chris Leach, another one of these guys, former congressman from Iowa, he was a basic far leftist. He used to caucus with the communists. He used to work with the communists. So not all Republicans are constitutional conservatives. You may have noticed that. Some of the never-Trumpers are just stupid. Some of them are just out of touch. But some of them are actual leftists. Leftists who call themselves Republicans. The left has always infiltrated the Republican Party. They infiltrated the Democrats more. But they also put people into the GOP. Like that woman, Jennifer Rubin, the so-called conservative who writes for the Washington Post, who is a complete and utter leftist. But she's the token Republican for the Washington Post. So just because someone's got an R after their name doesn't make them a conservative. So these people are a disgrace, and some of them, like Jeff Flake, have worked very, very closely with the hard left. I don't think they're hard leftists, but they are collaborators and traitors. I would say that for sure.
Okay, what do you know about Mitt Romney? Where does he fit in all of that?
Yeah, he's very much, well, he's a bit of a mixed bag. He's one of the few that stood up against Russia to some degree, but he's a big immigration amnesty man, which is a left-wing program. His father used to work with Saul Alinsky, can you believe that? And his father, George Romney, when he was governor of Michigan. So, look, I'm sort of glad that Mitt Romney never got elected, because I think he would have done the country down. You know, at least we stood up against Obama. He would have gulled too many conservatives, and he would have set the country up for destruction. So I don't think Mitt Romney's a leftist. He's an arrogant globalist and an elitist. That's what I'd say Mitt Romney is.
Okay. Somebody is commenting, if there is no president by noon on January 20th, the Congress selects a president. The Speaker Pelosi does not automatically become president. Think Hillary Clinton. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, look, I think they'd just go with Pelosi. Why? She'll do everything they want. She's a very smart and very socialist woman. You know, why bring in Clinton? You know, Pelosi will do what is required. She's a communist. You know, and you know, the Democrats will all vote for her because she's Speaker of the House. The Republicans will vote against her. But if the Democrats have a majority, well, who gets it? You know, so we got to understand the Democrats aren't. This is not going to finish with the election unless we win very convincingly. And after the election, the protests will probably increase until President Trump, because they'll have nothing left to lose until President Trump, because they want chaos, they want civil war. If there's not a clean election, they'll try to drive us into civil war and secession. And so Nancy Pelosi will be perfectly positioned to help that along. You know, she will help California secede. She'll help Oregon secede, Washington secede, if she is the effective president.
All right, we've got somebody asking about whether you've got, well, I think we heard at the beginning you've got a website, of course, but and I think you've got one or two books out there as well. Can you tell us a little bit about where to find it all and what you've got currently out there? Look,
I'm glad you asked, Mary. You know, thank you. Look, that's the book that I'd like people to get now. My website is trevorloudon.com. Just my name with .com on the end. trevorloudon.com. My new book, which very few of you will have, is called White House Reds. And it's only 250 pages, which is not like my normal books. But that is the communist backgrounds of the leading Democrats who stood for Congress. It's showing how the Democrats took over the leading communists who stood for Congress. Amy Klobuchar is a Marxist, people. The Miss Minnesota Nice. Pete Buttigieg is a Marxist. Minnesota, you know, nice little Pete. All of them were Marxists, including Joe Biden, one of the very worst and most treasonous Congress senators we've ever had. And he is fully exposed in here for the dirty deals. He has worked in the interests of Moscow and Beijing and Tehran his entire political career. So please get the book White House Reds. You can get it on Amazon, but it'll take a while to get it. If you get it through my website, trevorloudon.com, you can get it in a couple of days and I'll sign it for you. I'll autograph it for you. Also, my movie, Enemies Within, you can get that off my website as well. It profiles about 120, I say in the movie, it's about 100 members of Congress and 25 members of the US Senate who couldn't pass a background check to drive a school bus. And that exposes their Marxist and Muslim ties. It'll shock you. It's also available on Amazon Prime, been seen by over 2 million viewers on Amazon Prime with no advertising. So you'll understand the Congress, and this will help you to understand the Democratic Party. If you're in a war, the first thing you need to know is you're in one, And the second thing you need to know is who your enemies are and how they work. So those two items are designed to make that clear for people. They're frightening, but you need to know it if you're going to win.
You want to tell us a little bit about your current movie that you're working on, documentary, The Enemies Within the Church?
Enemies Within the Church. Andrew Breitbart used to say that politics is downstream from culture. Your culture shapes your politics. He could have added that your culture is downstream from your religion. So if our politics is screwed up and our culture is in trouble, what does it tell us about the churches? So what this new movie is doing, Enemies Within the Church, is showing the massive Marxist and some Muslim infiltration of the Christian churches. Not just the Catholic Church. We know we have a Marxist Pope in Francis now. Not just the mainstream Protestant churches. They've been the Communist Party at prayer for about 50 years now. We're talking major evangelical churches and even the Southern Baptists. The most reliably conservative denomination, largest Protestant denomination in the country, has now been taken over by Marxists, or people cooperating with Marxists like their president, J.D. Greer, the head of their ethics commission, Russell Moore, Walter Strickland, and others. They now are moving the Baptists way to the left. So we're exposing the communist infiltration of the churches. We're just doing the last bit of our fundraising drive now. We've raised about $290,000 out of our $300,000 budget. We're getting into post-production now, but we've been offered matching funds by a very wealthy donor out of Idaho. So if you go to our website, enemieswithinthechurch.com, it's enemieswithinthechurch.com, make a $10, $100, $1,000, $50 donation, and it'll be worth double. Every dollar you donate will be matched by our donor from Idaho. And in the next week, we hope to completely finish the funding. We will still need a little bit more for advertising and whatever, but the funding, the actual production will be completed, and hopefully we can still get this out before the election. We're really working hard on that well before the election, because I think it will. If my first movie woke you up, I'll tell you what, this is even more shocking. The penetration of the Christian churches is intense. And just think about it logically. The left controls the media. The left controls the unions. The left controls Hollywood. The left controls the Democratic Party. But these crazy evangelical Christians every now and then wake up and they break out and they elect a Ronald Reagan or a Donald Trump. It screws up the left's plans. It puts their agenda back. Do you think they're going to keep on putting up with that from the evangelical Christians without doing something about it? Well, in the last 5 years, they've done a lot about it. You're losing churches all over the country. You've got hundreds of woke pastors all about social justice, all about critical race theory, all about global warming, refugee resettlement, are now infesting churches all over the country. And young people are coming to those churches. They don't know any better. They don't know this is not real Christianity, and they are falling for it. In 5 years' time, American Christianity will be unrecognizable. The American church today is where the universities were 10 years ago. There are hardly a handful of conservative universities now. In 5 years' time, there'll be hardly a handful of conservative churches. If you think I'm exaggerating, just wait and see. But we want to put this movie out to make sure that doesn't happen. Because if that happens, our country is lost spiritually, culturally, and politically.
Very dangerous. Yes, I highly recommend it. I highly recommend it. Last question for you, and then we'll close it out. How is President Trump doing with exposing Islam? It has been, I guess it got mentioned in the RNC this week.
Yeah, I think Islam, is sort of gone on the back burner a bit because it's the It's the Marxists and the communists who are mainly burning down America right now. And I think that's unfortunate, because Islam is still working heavily with these communists, the red-green axis. I think when the election is over, we have to bring it back onto the agenda and demand that the Muslim Brotherhood is classified as a terrorist organization and these groups are actually shut down. And I think without an election to worry about, I think President Trump will be very, very open to that. But right now, I think there's too much else going on. He's focused on the election. A major epidemic and a communist insurrection and an election are probably more on his plate than he wants to deal with, without bringing up yet another subject. But Islam is still there, still doing what it's doing, and it will bring the country down if it's not stopped. But I honestly I don't think President Trump's got a lot of attention on it right now. He's more worried about the people, the communists burning down the cities, and the Chinese wrecking the economy and threatening us with war. But I haven't forgotten about it. I know you guys haven't forgotten about it. And President Trump will have to be reminded straight after the next election to get back on their case, I think.
Well, I want to say on behalf of Mark, sorry for the technical difficulties. We'll have to figure this out. We thought we had it nailed down. Apologies to all of our attendees. We really did do a lot of testing before we put this together for tonight. So major apologies to everybody. But thank you, Trevor, for joining us today. And this has been great information. I hope you can get that Enemies Within out very soon. I think it is critical for our election, because it's the evangelicals that need to be going to vote.
Yep, absolutely it is. There's more than enough evangelicals in this country to win the election easily, rampant, but too many of them don't vote. They're the largest non-voting bloc in the country, and they have the most to lose. They have more to lose than anybody, but they don't do it.
Yep.
So we've got to get them to the polls. Look, everybody listening tonight, I'm sure you've got evangelical friends who have this whacked idea that Christians don't get involved in politics. Well, God gave us a country with a constitution founded off the Bible. Christians understand that they are responsible for their neighbor. They're responsible to love God and their neighbor as themselves. That's got to, and I don't think it's still just being your next door neighbor. That means your city, it means your state, and it means your
out of preferences.
So thanks very much, people. Thanks for listening. And we'll all celebrate after the election. And we'll start getting ourselves ready for the next battle. Thank you.
Thanks, Trevor.
Proud to be amongst you. Proud to be part of the army that you guys are. Proud to march with you, all of you people.
All right, thank you. Good night, everybody.